Right, well, that was your last choice. I was particularly pleased, of course, that caravans went in. So thank you very much to Jeremy Clarkson.
Thank you.
Our final clip from Room 101 does to satisfaction by the Rolling Stones what Genghis Khan did to Central Europe, only less gracefully.
Jeremy Clarkson will be back on BBC Two tomorrow night with Top Gear, and next Wednesday's guest for Room 101 is Alan Davis.
Meet Streetwise director Martin Scorsese and hear him talk about two of his classic films, Taxi Driver with Robert De Niro, Sybil Shepherd, Harvey Keitel and Jodie Foster. And After Hours, starring Griffin Dunne, whose night out goes horribly wrong.
They're all trying to kill me. I mean, I just wanted to meet a nice girl, and now I've got to die for it?
A Scorsese triple bill, Saturday from 9:30 on BBC Two.
Topping the bill in 45 minutes, radical and maverick guitarist Billy Jenkins challenges convention in Jazz 606. Before that on BBC Two, the midweek Newsnight with Gordon Brewer.
As he prepares to return to the States from Africa, it looks as though Bill Clinton is off the hook. A US federal judge has decided to throw out the Paula Jones sexual harassment lawsuit. Good evening. In the last few minutes, a US federal judge has decided to throw out the sexual harassment lawsuit filed by Paula Jones against President Bill Clinton. I'll be asking a journalist from Newsweek, which began the investigation of the Monica Lewinsky affair, whether the president is now definitely off the hook. Also tonight, the French establishment's links with the extreme right haunt the nation from the past and threaten political chaos in the present. As France awaits an imminent verdict in the Papon trial, we'll have the latest on the former cabinet minister who's accused of sending Jews to the concentration camps. And a former foreign minister tells us links between some members of his own party and the racist National Front could lead to disaster for present-day French society. And are the pirates of Penzance about to walk the plank? The D'Oyly Carte company says it may have to close for lack of public funds. But if Gilbert and Sullivan are really so popular, why do they need a subsidy? If Bill Clinton thinks his trip to Africa is enough to dispel his domestic problems, then several teams of lawyers are poised to disillusion him. The special prosecutor, Kenneth Starr, is penning a report for Congress which may well say there's a basis for criminal charges against the president. But within the last few minutes, the Paula Jones case has been thrown out. Peter Marshall reports from Washington.
Life's full of consequence, that old devil consequence. He takes all the frivolous out. When you got the candle lit at both ends, the scandal it creates always keeps you on the run.
That's excellent. Yeah. All right. Okay.
says his sweetheart. Their relationship, on and off, lasted some 33 years, until he ran for president. Then there was a falling out, leaving Dolly in a rage.
I have never sought any publicity. Now what's happened is that Billy lied under oath about me, in fact made up a malicious lie. And I am going to speak out about that. I will not tolerate that.
The lie, she claims, is in Bill Clinton's deposition to Paula Jones' lawyers. He submitted a handwritten memo in which he writes of meeting Kyle Browning again for the first time in a long time at their high school reunion in 1994. She was angry, he writes, because he'd always refused to have any affair with her. He says her story is a fantasy. It wasn't true. To Dolly Kyle Browning, this is too much. Bill Clinton is making her out to be crazy. But, she says, that's typical.
That's the tack that they're starting now with Kathleen Willey. That's the tack that they started with Monica Lewinsky. You know, she watches soap operas. She must be crazy.
Do you believe the other stories? Do you believe Paula Jones' story?
I believe that something happened, and I don't know exactly what it was, and I believe that a jury will decide based on the evidence.
Do you believe Kathleen Willey?
Yes, I do. I believe all of these stories have a great deal of truth to them. Now, whether every detail is exactly correct, I don't know. But Billy believes that if one word of a story isn't true, you can say the story isn't true.
He said that to you, has he?
Oh, yes. He has said that on many occasions.
You're saying Bill Clinton has a difficult relationship with the truth?
He has no relationship with the truth. He wouldn't know the truth if it came up and bit him.
Certainly his memory lets him down. One day he has no recollection of a meeting with Kathleen Willey, then she goes on TV.
He touched my breast with his hand.
And hey presto.
And I have a very clear memory of the meeting, and I told the truth.
I'm going to do something really outrageous. I'm going to tell the truth.
The president's dissembling is now the stuff of Hollywood. John Travolta plays Governor Jack Stanton, everybody accepts it's Bill Clinton, in the new film just out here, Primary Colors.
Governor Jack Stanton seduced me.
No, it is not true.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Most Americans have long concluded their president is something of a womanizer who, shall we say, fibs to cover his tracks. But Paula Jones' lawyers have built a case which suggests far worse. They say Bill Clinton is a serial sexual predator who lies and intimidates his victims. Either way, the current controversy over the president has yet again raised one of America's most vexed public issues, the matter of sexual harassment. At Xerox, one of America's biggest corporations, the first session on the first day of employee training is a course on sexual harassment.
This is the process that Xerox goes through as far as sexual harassment. No tolerance, zero tolerance.
Thus, they hope to avoid multi-million-dollar lawsuits. There are currently 16,000 such cases every year. There's a good deal of debate, all reflecting the national confusion.
I work with all women. And sometimes they dress really provocatively. And guys are gonna look, I'm sorry. You know, it's hard not to stare. You know, it's like, it's natural.
And provocatively dressed is defined by whom? Is it defined by me or the person wearing it?
The majority of American women now say too many harassment cases are being brought. It's amid this mood Bill Clinton found himself in legal jeopardy but politically buoyant.
The mood of the country has changed completely since the early 90s, and that we've reacted against the sexual policing of that time. You know, and that the whole concern with sexual harassment has sort of reached this frenzied pitch. And, you know, we had this case a year ago where a 6-year-old child was suspended from school for kissing another 6-year-old on the cheek, and that was called sexual harassment. I think everyone in this country looked at that case and said, maybe this has gone too far.
And that's why Bill Clinton's ratings are holding up, you think?
Yes, I do.
Professor, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
What happened in the early 90s was Anita Hill, a lawyer who went before the nation to make the case against appointing her former boss, Clarence Thomas, to the Supreme Court. Thomas, she said, was a sexual harasser. He didn't touch, but he talked dirty.
After a brief discussion of work, he would turn the conversation to a discussion of sexual matters. His conversations were very vivid. He spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films involving such matters as women having sex with animals.
Feminists rallied in her support, explaining why it was understandable Professor Hill waited years to lodge a complaint.
We know what it can be like to work for a boss who insults you. who degrades you, and yet you feel you have to go on working, you have to go on being friendly.
But today, that same Ann Lewis is communications chief for the White House. She's all over TV, casting doubt on the harassment complaint of Kathleen Willey. Willey now, she says,
simply is contradicted by the person I met with who in 1996 was so positive about the president.
A leading harassment prosecutor says feminists like Lewis are performing contortions to defend the president. For example, over those Kathleen Willey allegations. Some feminists, Gloria Steinem, for example, has said, look, it's not harassment because he took no for an answer. He only did it once.
If you take that into a workplace scenario, does that mean your boss can come up and grab your breasts? And if you say no, say, okay, I won't do it again, and that's not sexual harassment? Can he rape you once? That's ludicrous. That's not the law, and that's just a scary interpretation of what is permissible with women.
She has no proof. She has no credibility. It's bull.
Woman trouble is an old Clinton problem. Primary Colors, the film, shows how these so-called bimbo eruptions were smothered by his 1992 campaign.
We've got to stop them before they stop us. We've got to crush them.
The Clinton campaign team's nightmare was newspapers offering big money to Clinton's alleged mistresses. Dolly Kyle Browning says she was approached.
They had the story, they approached me. An American tabloid. There were also British tabloids that were offering large sums of money for stories like this, and that was not what I wanted to do at all. I called Billy to warn him that the tabloids had my story, and he refused to talk to me because he was afraid I would tape record the conversation.
Why did he think that?
Because Jennifer Flowers' story had just come out the week before, and there were tapes. The bottom line was, if you cooperate with the media, we will destroy you.
That's what they told you?
That's what they told me, and those are the very words that they told other women. And if they would come forth and talk, you would hear that over and over, we will destroy you.
While she has numerous letters from Bill Clinton revealing, if nothing more, a close friendship, Dolly Kyle Browning says the truth was far more lurid. Back in the 1980s, she says, she and Clinton agreed they had a mutual emotional compulsion.
I told him that I had this problem, that I realized that that was a devastating, debilitating problem, and that something had to be done, and I was working on it. And after quite a bit of conversation, very intense conversation, I said, did you ever think you might be a sex addict? And he said, I know I am, and I've tried to overcome it.
But, I mean, that could be a joke, couldn't it? Isn't that a...
It was not a joke when he started crying. No, I don't think it was a joke.
He cried?
Yes, he cried. He was very upset.
In Greenwich Village in New York and right across America, psychologists now commonly diagnose and treat sex addiction.
And yet all I could think at that moment was, this woman is hot for me. And she doesn't know me, you know, and yet I was just determined at that point to get her to notice me.
They say it's little different to alcoholism, drug or gambling addiction. For our cameras, the counsellors played out a typical sex addict's therapy session.
Maybe I can actually, you know, go to bed with her. I mean, it's, you know, I know there's consequences, and I know that next time it could be worse than what happened last time. But I don't know how to stop.
Paula Jones' lawyers said that could be Bill Clinton. Standing by the punch bag on which her clients vent their anger, the doctor in charge says the president is textbook stuff. Drink, drugs and gambling are all in his family.
One of the things we see about President Clinton that's typical of all sex addicts is that they thrive in times of crisis. There's a tremendous adrenaline rush. Their abilities to exert power and control really surge to the fore. But when things are going well, they're bored, they're restless, and it's almost as though at times like that they have to create a crisis. We certainly see this pattern with President Clinton.
So is there a pattern? This is the moment he first met campaign volunteer Kathleen Willey.
Welcome to Richmond, finally.
Later, he appears to point her out and asks her name. He's told Willey, Kathy Willey.
He sent someone over to get my telephone number.
President Clinton has engaged in what I think is a really not bright defense of saying, I didn't remember it, I don't recall it, but I'm sure it didn't happen because I don't do those kinds of things. That opens up the door wide open for Paula Jones to come back through her counsel and say, but you do those kinds of things, Bill Clinton.
Last night, yet another woman said he did those kind of things. A former Miss Arkansas confirmed she'd had a one-night stand with the then state governor 15 years ago. However, contrary to rumour, she'd been willing. It's a measure of how far things have evolved that report of consensual sex will have helped the president. The poll suggested he was invulnerable. Now Bill Clinton's fought off the most concerted legal attack.
I told Billy 10 years ago, if you don't get your act together, it will come back to bite you. And that's what's happening. He has wonderful qualities. He's very intelligent. He is, he cares about people, but he uses women.
'Cause then comes the consequence, that old devil consequence flings you back with a bounce. It's consequences what counts.
That was Peter Marshall outlining the background to the Paula Jones case. And I should apologise for the loss of sound at the top of that report. But today's ruling by the US District Judge Susan Weber Wright, which has just come through in the past few minutes, she's the Arkansas judge in charge of the case, apparently came in response to a motion filed by President Clinton's lawyers in February. They argued that the lawsuit should be dismissed because Miss Jones had failed to prove that she suffered any professional setback following the unwanted sexual advances she claimed he had made towards her. Well, we're joined from Washington now by Eleanor Clift of Newsweek magazine, which began the investigation of the Monica Lewinsky affair. The trial was due to go ahead on May the 27th in Little Rock. There's been no response yet from President Clinton, who's still out of the country in Africa. Eleanor Clift, what are you hearing from your end that's happened? What has happened to the Paula Jones case?
Well, the judge has thrown it out, which means this is the end of it unless the Jones lawyers decide to appeal to a higher court. Apparently, the Judge Wright bought the argument of the Clinton lawyers that Ms. Jones did not have a legal case, that she could not prove that she suffered in the workplace. But in the course of going through discovery, the discovery legal process, Paula Jones's attorneys sought license to interview a whole range of women who Clinton had been rumored to have relationships with over the years, on the theory that some of them may have gotten favors that Paula Jones was denied because she refused to have sex with the then Governor Clinton. And so it was really a bizarre way to throw out every allegation and rumor that has circulated for the last 2 decades about Bill Clinton.
Eleanor, just to get this clear, the reason we think the judge has thrown this out, it's not that the judge is saying that President Clinton necessarily did not make a sexual advance to Paula Jones. It's this argument that she hasn't actually suffered any professional damage as a result of it.
Well, that's right. She brought her case. The statute of limitations had expired on any sexual harassment charge before she stepped forward in the company of Clinton's conservative critics, I might add. And she filed the suit under a federal civil rights ruling. And so she had to prove that her civil rights were somehow violated and she had suffered in the workplace. And among the things that her lawyers alleged was that she didn't receive flowers on one secretary's day when other secretaries did. It was a very thin legal suit, and I think that the judge recognized this. But, you know, she's going to take some heat from Paula Jones' attorneys and from the president's conservative critics in the country, but she is a Republican appointee, and so that should spare her to some degree that this was somehow a partisan decision on her part.
All right, now where does that leave Kenneth Starr, the special prosecutor, who is at this very moment frantically penning a report on the president?
Well, Kenneth Starr proceeds, and he is expected to issue a report sometime this summer. He has yet to come to terms with how he's going to use Monica Lewinsky, who, after all, is the young woman.
Sorry to interrupt you, Eleanor, but does this judgment that we're just hearing about now affect Kenneth Starr's position in any way?
I think it affects it psychologically. I mean, I think the country, which really, there's been a big backlash to all of this anyway. Clinton is the most popular president ever at this point in a second term. I think now the public will be even more inclined to view Ken Starr's investigation as more of the same, a political witch hunt. So he's got a public relations problem, and he still has a legal problem too, because he hasn't figured out how he's going to get Ms. Lewinsky's testimony. And if he's forced to indict her, I think that would really play very badly in the country if he indicted a young woman who was forced to talk because she didn't want to speak about a possible relationship with the president.
Okay, so those old devil consequences. Who cares, really? Eleanor Crift, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Do not damage France by your verdict. Maurice Papon warned the 9 jurors and 3 judges as they retired to deliberate on whether he sent hundreds of Jews to their death during the Second World War. The Papon case has focused public anxiety again on the ambiguous role their leaders played under the Nazi occupation. Resistance heroes or abject collaborators, or, just as uncomfortably, perhaps a bit of both. When Maurice Papon arrived at Bordeaux Station in October last year, it was the start of what became the longest criminal trial in French history. It was from here, too, that many of the Jews he is accused of deporting began their journeys to Nazi death camps. Papon, now 87, was charged with crimes against humanity committed during his time as an official of the wartime Vichy regime. Prosecutors claim that while he was head of the so-called Service for Jewish Questions in Bordeaux, he was responsible for the arrest of more than 1,500 Jews. But in an exclusive interview with the BBC last year, Papon denied all the charges against him. Throughout the trial, he has refused to express any remorse, saying he was acting on the orders of occupying German forces.
J'ai le sentiment d'être une sorte de victime.
I feel I'm being used as a scapegoat for things done by a regime which is now in the past. I feel I'm seen as a symbol carrying all the sins of the past is on trial here, not a man with nothing to be ashamed of.
Far from admitting any guilt for his Vichy activities, Papon has presented himself as a valiant agent for the anti-Nazi resistance and claims he tried to help as many persecuted Jews as he could. Closing his defence today, Papon gave an impassioned speech to the court, claiming he was a victim in a political show trial. He also warned, "Be careful that France does not get hurt by this verdict outside our borders. It would be a humiliation for our nation to be linked with Nazi Germany in responsibility for Jewish genocide." A list of the names of Jews deported from Bordeaux has been displayed outside the court throughout the trial. Their memory is something that opponents of Papon are determined to honour. Many have accused him not merely of carrying out orders, but of zealously collaborating with the Nazis in their elimination of the Jews. If he's found guilty, Papon's supporters say the whole of France will have to accept that the Vichy regime has been legally established as a willing accomplice to Nazi atrocities. Well, our correspondent Kevin Connolly is in Bordeaux. Kevin, when are you expecting a verdict in this case?
Well, trial by jury here can be a laborious process. The jurors, with the judge sitting with them, are considering 800 separate questions relating to the deaths of 74 Jews who were deported from Bordeaux during the war. That will take, obviously, a very long time to do at that level of detail. The answer to when the verdict is due, probably sometime in the small hours of this morning. But there have been cases like this which have gone on for several days. Now, why is it that something which, after all, happened a very long time ago seems to strike such a raw nerve in contemporary France? I think the simple truth is that the painful period under wartime German occupation is something with which France is still to come to terms. It's not at peace with its history in that time. And the trial of Maurice Papon, like many similar episodes in the recent past, has really raised again the questions of how much collaboration and how much resistance there was without providing clear and satisfactory answers. Kevin, thanks very much. Now, it's not just the past which is causing France's national neurosis at the moment. In last week's regional elections, the racist National Front captured its biggest ever share of the vote. That was bad enough. But then several regional leaders from the centre-right said they'd do deals with the Front in order to stay in power, something which until now has been taboo in French politics. Does this spell the end for France's moderate right? Here's James Robbins.
La France profonde, the ideal, unchanging France of our dreams, or is it? If Burgundy is the essential France, then France has reason to fear, because the vineyards which produce some of the most celebrated vintages in the world are also feeding the growth of the extreme right. It's here, quite as much as in the poor inner cities of France, that the Front National of Jean-Marie Le Pen is building loyalty and strength. Vincent Bouzereau is a winemaker whose family has prospered here for generations. Vincent takes immense pride both in his work and his product. The reds of Beaune and the white Burgundies of Meursault. But Vincent is disgusted by the weakness of Jacques Chirac and the established centre-right. He's joined 1 in 7 French voters backing the National Front of Jean-Marie Le Pen.
Actuellement, celui qui est le plus proche de mes idées.
Really, the party which is closest to my ideas is the National Front, because it offers the best chance of working, of raising your family properly, a decent education, and protection from insecurity.
Insecurity is a constant theme. That and family values, fear of change, and France for the French. But Vincent stressed to me that he and his wife Aline are not racists.
Okay. Je suis catholique, pratiquant.
I am a practicing Catholic. You could go around the village. I have Spanish friends, Portuguese, Algerian friends. Ask people if I am a racist. I don't think they would say I am a racist.
J'ai même des amis anglais.
But isn't the National Front racist, I asked?
Non.
And it's certainly true that in these regional elections, the Front cleverly played down its anti-immigrant policy of forced repatriation. That helped broaden its appeal to the French middle class. The strategy was brilliantly successful. Supporters of Jean-Marie Le Pen and his extreme right National Front are convinced that everything in France is now running their way. After stunning success in recent regional council elections, this area, Burgundy, is just one where the Front now holds the balance of power. Yet the established political parties like to portray Le Pen as the devil in French politics and his supporters as untouchable. Yet the centre-right parties behind President Chirac know that their only path back to power may be through making pacts with the devil, doing deals with the Front. And centre-right politicians did do deals with the Front in 5 regions. In Burgundy, it's Jean-Pierre Soissons who relied on the votes of 9 councillors from the extreme right to be elected head of the regional assembly. But within days, Monsieur Soissons was forced to quit after a national outcry.
Le Front National qui m'a donné le baiser qui tue, et donc la droite est condamnée.
The National Front gave me the kiss which kills.
Contre la coalition de gauche.
The right is condemned to a contest with the combined coalition of the left. It cannot win or hope to win such a battle without using or benefiting from the support of the Front. Or perhaps in some years' time, from an agreement with the National Front.
D'un accord avec le Front National.
But President Chirac rejected that outright and instructed Monsieur Soissons to resign. In an extraordinary televised address to the nation, the president condemned deals with the National Front. The end cannot justify the means.
Accepte-t-il le risque de voter pour un parti de nature raciste et xénophobe?
The National Front he called racist and xenophobic. The president's dismay has only heightened the pleasure of the extreme right. Their smiling party boss in Burgundy, Pierre Jaboulet-Verchères, is also one of the biggest names in the wine trade. He is the local kingmaker who raised up, then destroyed Jean-Pierre Soissons, and he's convinced Mr. Chirac's centre-right parties are doomed.
The centre-right will be eaten by, a piece of it will be eaten by the socialists, and the other piece will be eaten by the Front National.
What can the centre-right do to avoid that?
Nothing.
They're doomed.
They will disappear.
They clearly don't believe that themselves. They think they can take you on
when
and win.
you look, if you have looked at their face on the 15th of March at the TV, after the result of the election, you have looked at the face of dead people.
If you're right about the slow death of the centre-right...
No, slow. Now it's very quick.
And these elections over, the Front isn't even playing down its race policies anymore, exploiting unemployment to batter the established parties.
What we want today is to stop immigration.
But you would send some home as well?
Yes, all the people who are criminals, first. All the people who have come without the right to come, of course. But it's how many people? 1 million people. But you know, if Le Pen gets to the power, they will go away without us doing anything.
Because they'll be too frightened?
No, because we are not going to pay any longer to them.
Le Pen himself glories in both the loyalty and hostility which he inspires. He's already been found guilty of assault during last year's campaigning. Tomorrow he faces sentencing for attacking a woman candidate. He'll probably get a large fine. His appeal is to the thuggish element of the extreme right. But there's also a rather more subtle tactician waiting to succeed. Bruno Maigret, second in command, avoids violence, but still is called the danger man in the French press. That's because he's the smooth voice, the brains behind the current strategy, offering support to the centre-right parties simply to divide and weaken them.
Ce qui est très grave en France, et ça ne se sait pas assez, c'est que...
What is very serious in France is that the politically correct Frenchman has gone so far that he has confused patriotism with racism. It's true that if patriotism is racism, then by that definition we are racist because we are patriots. But in reality, we are not racist.
Si c'est du racisme, alors là, oui, sous cette définition, nous sommes racistes parce que nous sommes patriotes. Mais en réalité, nous ne sommes pas racistes, bien sûr que.
The left are certainly alive to the dangers when Monsieur Maigret predicts the front will be the government within 10 years. The left brought tens of thousands onto the streets in 15 cities at the weekend. But the centre-right opposition accused the government and the left of exploiting their troubles. And senior politicians do acknowledge the scale of the current crisis.
Our main problem is that we do not listen to the people who vote for us. And we have not listened to them during 10 years, 15 years, and afterwards they just leave us. They leave us for the left, that's why Mr. Jospin is in power. They leave us for abstention, they don't vote, or they leave us for extreme right. And the main problem is a problem in our camp, in our parties, in our mind, and that's probably the most difficult to solve.
Avec papa, attention.
For now, though, it's the Front National which looks radical and attractive to more and more French voters. The front is even promising salaries to French mothers to stay at home and produce more babies. The Bouzereau family has already been won over to the front. The battle is now on for the soul of France.
That was James Robbins. In a moment, why Gilbert and Sullivan's lot is not a happy one, and the latest on the Clinton case. But first, some of the day's other news. The Irish Prime Minister, Bertie Ahern, warned today of large disagreements with the British government over a key element of the Northern Ireland peace plan proposals. Speaking before a meeting this evening with Tony Blair, Mr Ahern said he didn't know if the gap between the governments over the powers to be given to cross-border institutions could be resolved. A man has been arrested in South Ruislip in London after a suspect package was found near Sainsbury's supermarket. Bomb squad officers carried out a controlled explosion on the package. Police will not say whether the arrest is linked to the so-called Mardi Gras bombings. The national lottery operator Camelot took steps to distance itself today from controversial shareholder GTEC by buying out the American company's stake in the lottery. Meanwhile, the government announced that the lottery regulator would be replaced by a new 5-member commission. Now, what they want is the very model of a modern public subsidy. What they're getting is nothing. The D'Oyly Carte Company, purveyor of Gilbert and Sullivan ditties to the nation, may go bust. The Arts Council says it can't afford to pay them. They say the council are a bunch of knobs who don't understand Gilbert and Sullivan's distinctly middle-market charms. It's a story of cultural snobbery and elitism, and the object of fun is one of Britain's oldest institutions. Iolanthe tells the tale of an Arcadian shepherd who becomes an MP to court the ward of the Lord Chancellor. It's one of the D'Oyly Carte's most popular productions. But the action on stage is being overshadowed by the goings-on behind the scenes. Today, the light opera company received cross-party support from MPs determined to save it from the gimmicks and modernising favoured by larger opera companies.
Perhaps it is too accessible. Perhaps people like it too much.
Perhaps if it wrapped up bricks in muslin or islands in plastic, it would be deemed worthy of Arts Council funding. Perhaps if it cross-dressed the cast of the Gondoliers, or had the crew of HMS Pinafore clad in black leather and chains, it would then be deemed capable, worthy of Arts Council funding. But it doesn't do that. It brings light opera to the people.
The company was formed in 1875 to stage the so-called Savoy operas by Gilbert and Sullivan. It achieved worldwide fame, but now has no permanent base and relies on touring in the English provinces. While the Royal Opera House receives £8 million a year from the Arts Council, the D'Oyly Carte has to rely on sponsorship and the box office.
If daubs which are incomprehensible to the vast majority of the people of this country, if tinned turds at the Serpentine are worthy of public subsidy, then Gilbert and Sullivan, that wonderful marriage of marvellous music, of high quality, and superb verse, and it is superb verse, that deserves Arts Council help.
Gilbert and Sullivan were the Andrew Lloyd Webbers of their day, and today their work attracts the same disdain from those who think it unchallenging and middle-brow.
Since I came to know Gilbert Sullivan at Manchester University as a humble working-class lad at the time, Gilbert Sullivan is positively upper class as far as I'm concerned, but for the Arts Council, it's middle-brow and down-market.
The only discordant note tonight was struck by the Arts Council. They said other arts companies faced equally serious financial problems, and further funding for the D'Oyly Carte was unlikely. Well, I'm joined now by Sir Michael Bishop, who's the chairman of the D'Oyly Carte Trustees. If people want to go and see 19th century light opera, nothing to stop them, but why on earth should the rest of us subsidise them?
Well, these operas were built around and they were composed for a full orchestra and a full chorus, and the commercial theatre today simply can't afford the size and scale of the operation and be profitable without cutting them down considerably. And if we want to retain a national musical heritage, we have to perform these operas in the form which they were originally composed. We have to have an orchestra of some 29 people, we have to have a full chorus, and it has to be, in every sense, performed in a definitive style. That actually costs more money than you actually can either raise through the box office by people coming to see it, or you can raise by private sector sponsorship. There's a gap that has to be filled.
Well, why? I mean, if Gilbert and Sullivan are as popular as D'Oyly Carte claim they are, it should be a commercial venture.
Well, it isn't. The truth of the matter is that there is a gap between what it costs to perform the definitive performance of these operas and what we can reasonably expect to get at the box office, and also encourage private sector sponsors to put up money for. There's a gap that has to be filled. And what we have done over the last 10 years is we've actually required far less money to bridge that gap than any other form of subsidised opera, whether it be grand opera or many other art forms. We actually use the money very little money we have had in the most efficient and profitable way.
But, I mean, there are lots of ancient songwriting duos taking their greatest hits around the country. The Rolling Stones come to mind in this connection. They don't get a subsidy. What is it?
They didn't need a 27-piece orchestra either.
No, but what is it about the merits of Gilbert and Sullivan that makes you think they should get a subsidy?
Well, I don't think anybody's suggesting they may, but maybe in 100 years' time somebody wants to replicate what they did may require a subsidy to do it.
But why? I mean, actually, I thought you ran an airline, but you've clearly given that up. I mean, what took you from that to Gilbert and Sullivan? What's so interesting about them?
Well, I think the important thing is, yes, 85–90% of my time, as you say, is running an airline. But I think it's a very, very important thing to put back into our national fabric of our life, something which is very much a part of it. I think that Gilbert and Sullivan is an extremely important stepping stone to serious music for young people. It actually takes them down the path of serious music. It maybe takes them beyond operetta into playing a musical instrument or being involved in grand opera and many other forms of music art. But Gilbert and Sullivan is something that appeals on a wide basis to everybody. It's very, very popular, but it isn't sufficiently mass popularity to be able to wash its face financially. It does need actually some assistance.
If it can't wash its face, what's going to happen to the D'Oyly Carte Company?
Well, the D'Oyly Carte Company will have to close down its touring operations and revert to a benign trust unless we are able to actually show.
What does that mean? Does that mean you can't?
We can't tour. We've been touring for 22 weeks a year. We've been playing to over 100,000 people every season, 1 million people over the last 10 years. But it's important to say that many of our regional opera companies receive something like 7 million, and the Welsh National Opera, Opera North, the Royal Opera House itself receives 17 million pounds.
So why not some for you?
Well, not exactly that, but if I may say, the English National Opera received a grant of £1.3 million simply to carry out a feasibility study of whether the Coliseum Theatre should be rebuilt. For £1.3 million, we can keep Gilbert and Sullivan as national heritage for a long time.
All right, Michael Bishop, thanks very much. Back to the Paula Jones case. Since we've been on the air, Mike McCurry, the White House press secretary, has been answering questions on the dismissal of the Paula Jones lawsuit. He said President Clinton is very pleased but surprised with the decision.
The President's I can tell you the President got a message to call Mr. Bennett, his lawyer, which he did. I called him a little bit after 9 o'clock. The President got the news from Mr. Bennett. He asked if it was, in fact, an April Fool's joke that Mr. Bennett was playing on him, and assured that it was not. The President thanked Mr. Bennett for his fine work, said he appreciated everything that the attorneys had done in this case, and obviously the President was pleased that the judge agreed with the very detailed arguments that the President's attorneys have put forward in this case, and I think he believes that the court's ruling speaks more eloquently than he could on the matter.
Mike McCurry. Well, Peter Marshall, whose film we saw earlier on in the programme, is in Washington. Peter, pretty extraordinary turn up for the books, isn't it? Hello, Peter, can you hear me?
It is a turn up, although not... I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
It is extraordinary, not entirely right. Gordon, it is a turn-up for the books, but not entirely surprising, although I think the President was surprised. Mr. McCurry also said this wasn't entirely expected. The people who may well have had wind of this a couple of days ago were the Jones legal team, because they appeared to be becoming increasingly desperate, raising several new matters just in the past 48 hours. They raised a case of alleged rape by Bill Clinton 20 years ago, even though the alleged victim denied it ever happened.
Does any of that
they
matter
still try
now,
to throw
Peter?
That in.
Does any of that matter now? Now the Jones case
really,
is gone, it all goes with it, does it?
Legally. It all goes with it legally. It's all out of the window legally.
What about Kenneth Starr? Where does that leave him?
Well, it leaves him out on a limb in a way, but his inquiry goes on. It's actually separate from the Jones case. It goes ahead, but I think politically or psychologically, he's weaker than ever. The Republicans, and he has to report to the Republican Congress sometime in the middle of the summer, they've no real stomach for taking on a popular president anyway. Nobody really has the stomach to try and impeach Clinton, and now Starr is left with a report that nobody really wants to read.
It will affect Starr politically, won't it? Because I mean, we heard Eleanor Cliff from Newsweek earlier on saying that the Clinton camp will make much capital out of arguing that Paula Jones was supported by some elements in the Republican Party. And the Clinton camp will be able to say, well, look, this proves our case, that this whole affair, including Starr, is just a politically inspired conspiracy.
Yes, they will, and that's why the mainstream Republicans in Congress have been distancing themselves from the Paula Jones case for some months now. Trent Lott, the Republican leader, tried to say a month ago that he thought Starr should really get on with things if it had gone on too long, and he was rebuked by some of the more conservative members of his party, but I think he was saying that because of public opinion. It was in line with public opinion. People just don't really want this anymore.
Do you think after this that Kenneth Starr will really have the nerve to go to Congress and present a report which asks for a criminal indictment of the President of the United States?
I think a criminal indictment is most unlikely. As I was saying, Starr reports what he reports. I mean, he's an independent judge, but whether Congress will very happily receive that report or whether they'll try and shove it to one side is another matter. They don't really want to handle this. They were trying to shuffle it off to a subcommittee a couple of weeks ago. They just haven't got the stomach for it, really. Clinton is too popular to take on.
Peter, thank you very much indeed. Apologies for the slight delay on the sound over the satellite there, and apologies also for the fact that Hervé de Charette didn't appear. He fell victim to the coverage of that Paula Jones case. A quick look at tomorrow's papers, and that news we've just been discussing was too late for them. The Times goes on the lottery story. GTEC to sell lottery stake in £51 million deal. GTEC bought out of lottery in the Financial Times, and more pain for exporters, says Eddie George, the Governor of the Bank of England. Camelot sacks GTEC as lottery cleans up its act in the Independent. In the Herald Tribune, Israel clears plan to leave Lebanon, it says. In the Daily Mail, Diana's Hewitt love letters stolen. Intimate letters said to have been written by Princess Diana to James Hewitt were offered for sale to a newspaper. It was revealed last night. And clean sweep at Camelot, again, the lottery story in the Express. And in the Mirror, Diana love letters, the Hewitt story, Diana love letters scandal, exposed by the Mirror, no less. And that's all from Newsnight tonight. I'll be back with more tomorrow night. Until then, from all of us in the programme, a very good night.
As exporters complain about the high value of the pound, Andrew Neil asks if Britain is heading for another recession. That's the Midnight Hour in 45 minutes.
The Battle of Britain, according to popular myth, spared the country from a Nazi invasion. But did it really stop Hitler invading?
One cannot say that the Royal Air Force prevented the invasion, because Hitler no longer thought of any invasion.
By the time the Battle of Britain was won, Hitler had his sights on a much bigger prize.
If you go east, you cannot go at the same time west.
The first in a new series of Timewatch begins Tuesday at 9:30 on BBC Two.
Opening the doors to the BBC Jazz Club, Lem Sissay brings us more basement sounds from the 606.
606 Club? Listen, I was there on opening night. Boy, what a lineup. I tell you, there was Big Spiderbeck, Duke Ellington, Ivy Benson's all-girl orchestra, Pink Floyd, and T.S. Eliot did the poetry. It all finished up with this huge jam session, and Thelonious Monk joined in on the spoons.
No shit, Sherlock. Tonight, we have got an incredible lineup. We've got Diana Krall, we've got the Ray Gelato Giants, we've got Billy Jenkins, voice of the people, and we have got the Don Weller Quartet. Oh, we've got him.